Welcome to On Our Minds. I'm Dr. Russ Witcher,
And I'm Dr. Brenda Wilson.
and we are two journalism professors here at Tennessee Tech. On this podcast, we sit down with other faculty and talk academics, personal interests, and teaching experiences.
Well, on our minds today, we're talking with Dr. Hannah Upole of the School of Human Ecology, and she teaches in the area of merchandising and design. Welcome, Dr. Upole. And
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got interested in this field of study.
Yes. So I'm a first generation college student, and so when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, I think in school we kind of went like doctor, lawyer, police officer, like the general things. And I say that because I'm very non-traditional to my field. My bachelor's degree from West Virginia University is actually in biology. So I did a full 4-year biology degree. And then I did an internship at a doctor's office. And this is why I tell my students internships are very, very, very important, because it taught me very, very quickly that that was probably not the field for me. As much as I thought I loved medicine, I didn't think I could work in it every day. And I knew I liked fashion. I thought fashion was fun. I thought it was interesting. I worked at a museum for many, many years when I was in even middle school and high school. I volunteered there. And so I found my way over to the fashion program at West Virginia University with full intention that I was going to change my major as a senior. I thought, I'm just going to do it. It doesn't matter what they tell me how long it's going to be. I don't want to do biology. And I met with the advisor there, and she said, you know what, you have a background that we could kind of weave this into the textile world, and we could weave it into like consumer economics and consumer behavior. And so I applied for their master's program. So that's really where the fashion began at that point. And so I did my master's in design and merchandising, and then my PhD in human and community development, which had the emphasis in merchandising and design. All three of those at West Virginia, up in Morgantown, West Virginia. And then I came to Tech straight after finishing my dissertation. I started at Tech in August of 2017, and I have been here ever since.
All right.
Yeah.
Are you originally from West Virginia?
I'm originally from Western Maryland, so
Okay.
as far west as you can go in Maryland, high up in the mountains. I can walk to West Virginia in about 10 minutes from my house. So I tell people I'm probably more from West Virginia than Maryland, to be honest. But have lived there. My parents still live there, so I'm the only one in Tennessee.
All right.
Yeah.
Was it an adjustment to come to Cookville?
I think Cookville is very similar to my hometown. It's actually a lot larger than where I grew up. There's only about 5,000 people in my hometown, so very, very small, but very much local community driven, like Cookville is. The one thing I do tell everybody is they cannot take me back there because I am too much in love with the winter time in Cookville. As hot as it is right now in the summer, and we're all talking about this heat and the humidity, I will take it any day of the week over where my parents live. I think their average snowfall is like 128 inches a year or something like that.
Yeah.
And Cookville's is like 5 or 6. So I will take that and have a nice mild winter over the cold up there any day.
We panic over 5 or 6 inches.
It's fun. I'm one of those people that I love. I just love watching everybody interact with the winter weather. That's fun.
Yeah, even this heat is actually unusual,
Yes.
for us.
Yes.
But yes, we do like a little bit of snow, but
Yeah.
128
And
inches.
nobody needs to live in that.
No.
Yes, well, you sort of answered my question on how you get from an undergraduate degree in biology to merchandising and design. So what sort of things do you bring from the biology field into the textiles, the
Yes.
study of textiles?
So textiles is a huge world. I tell everybody it is something that most people don't realize how many times a day they're interacting with textiles. They just think it's your clothes or it's the carpet that's on the ground. But I mean, like glass is technically a textile. You know, you have fiberglass, you have plexiglass, you have metal components that have fibrous natures to them. One of the big things that I worked on a lot at WVU was kind of the connection between the biology world of sustainable textiles. So using things like different types of bacteria, different types of fungi and algae that could be woven into fabrics in order to create more sustainable types of, sustainable textiles. That there are fabrics out there that actually like eat odor in the clothing, so you don't actually have to wash it. And they use that in hospitals even, so it keeps things very sanitary. There's a lot of textiles out there right now that are being made with components that are completely biodegradable. We know that that textile waste is huge, but if we can create the textile from some sort of organic matter, when it does eventually go to a landfill, it biodegrades so much faster than some of the synthetic textiles that we're seeing. So kind of pulling in those components with that sustainability aspect from the biology side of the world into the textile-driven fashion world.
You're the advisor to a student club.
Yeah.
Tell us about some trips y'all have been on.
All right, so I'm the advisor for the Fashion Merchandising Association, a very active student group on campus, and one of their favorite things to do is travel. They love to go to anywhere in the United States, and we do go abroad. We haven't since COVID, but we do like to go abroad every 4 years, and we try to go to places that give them some exposure to fashion in different ways. So we went to Asheville, North Carolina, 2 years ago now, and we got a chance to meet with more of an art-driven fashion society, so a little more focused on small production, small batch fashion. This past year, we went to New York City, which is every fashion student's absolute dream to walk there. Maybe they don't want to live there, but they at least want to go. They at least want to see it. And we had a chance to meet with some designers that were there, a couple of textile companies that do the sustainable textiles. We had a chance to meet with some large-scale companies as well. We had the opportunity to go to Radio City Music Hall and do a behind-the-scenes tour and see how they costume all the Rockettes and things like that. We've been to Los Angeles before, so they get a chance to see the West Coast is a little bit more mass production, fast fashion as we would call it, so they got a chance to see a lot more large-scale production facilities, and the California Market Center, which is just massive and has thousands of brands in it that buyers go to. So we try to balance in between some more smaller communities, more local, more sustainability driven, and then we also go, of course, and hit New York City and LA, and when we travel internationally, we tend to go to Italy, France, and the United Kingdom to see the markets in those 3 countries as well.
Yeah, I went to, you mentioned Nashville, I went to the Biltmore when they were doing the Downton Abbey.
Yes, they loved, we went to the Biltmore. I think that was on the top of the list of favorite things they've ever been to, because that just put everything together. It was architecture, interior design, fashion, art, the gardens. I mean, it was their dream. I think they would have loved if they would have just been able to like run through it on their own. They had the guided tour, of course, but they were absolutely loving that. It's a beautiful place, anybody that hasn't been before.
So in terms of sustainability, where is the field as far as the affordability now of clothes made from, you were saying, biodegradable elements or things? The style, I guess, and the cost, are we? We're getting there. That's what I always tell people. It is still, sustainable textiles are always going to be at least probably twice, if not 3 times as costly as what our synthetic fibers are. Things like rayon and polyester are just so inexpensive to make. I mean, they're chemically made. They are 100% chemical most of the time. Rayon has a little bit of wood pulp in it, so it does have that natural component, but they're easy to make. Machines can make like 16 tons worth of this fabric in a 1-day time period. So cost gets to be an issue when we're talking about organic cotton, things that, it takes time. It takes, growing the cotton and harvesting, and sometimes something comes through and the cotton crop isn't able to be used. It's a lot more costly. However, you also see pictures, and most people don't know this, the fast fashion industry, when you're buying something and it costs $2 or $3 because it's made out of a synthetic fiber of some sort, it's definitely going to end up in a landfill, and then it's going to end up in the ocean, and then it's going to end up on a beach somewhere. The picture I love to show my students, because it really hits home for them, is I say, if you guys go to the beach for your vacation, you're sitting out on the sand, you're looking at the ocean, it's beautiful. If you go to Ghana, they actually don't even have sand anymore on their beaches. They walk on clothes. They have mountains of clothes that are just stacked up from where it has washed across an entire ocean onto their beach, and is just stacked up. Some of these things are 6, 7, 8 foot tall. They're literal mountains and dunes of just fabric, and they have to walk across it because of the waste, and there's nothing that's going to happen. I mean, there's really no way. The best way to dispose of a synthetic textile is burning it. And most people, again, that's very unsafe because it's going to put chemicals out into the environment. So it has to be in a controlled facility. So
most of the time it just gets thrown away, and then it hangs out in a landfill and eventually makes its way to a lot of other harmful places in the environment.
Yeah, the inexpensive clothing is costly in a lot of other ways. Yes.
Very much so.
What about recycled materials? I'm seeing a lot of that in the labels of clothing.
Yes, I think that is probably more popular right now. It cuts down on the cost tremendously, so you don't have to worry as much then about it being 100% recycled or 100% sustainable organic cotton. If you're able to blend it, you're able to mix it together, you can cut costs in half easily. So it makes it much more affordable for the consumer. Also, I always tell students from a marketing perspective, it's something that you can say this is made out of 9.5 water bottles. And when you give a number to a consumer, it means something more than just saying 100% recycled fabric. They're thinking, oh, okay, it's just, they've taken it, they've washed it, they've turned it into something else. When you're able to connect it to something they know, like, oh, that's 9 water bottles that has been turned into this T-shirt that I'm wearing, it does tend to also, in the consumer's mind, make them realize they are doing some good when they're purchasing something like that.
And then the companies that will say, yes, this pullover may cost $50 or more than the competition, but we want you to have this one very solid piece of clothing that will be and a lot of those companies they have a tie to the environment anyway, outdoor companies and that sort of thing, so speaks to the audience, I'm sure.
Oh, it does. It's great. And I mean, our students, we talk a lot about quality over quantity, and I do think there is an interesting push and pull going on out there right now in the industry. There is a huge market for cheap, fast fashion that is buy and then disposable, done, gone, don't need it anymore. But then on the opposite side, there's an amazing culture of thrifting and vintage, and that, is also massive and trying to push against some of that.
Yes.
You don't need to go buy the shirt for $5 on, wish.com. You can go to Goodwill and find a shirt that is just as good and is probably made of better material, and it's going to last you longer, and then you are extending its life cycle. You're not adding something just new into the cycle itself. So I think it's so interesting to see these two worlds really kind of fight with each other over, no, you need as much stuff as possible versus, no, you don't. You need good items and things that are going to last you and things that have history and story behind them.
And I imagine your students are particularly skilled at making those outfits from thrift store items. I see, students around campus, and I think, wow, that's really well put together. They may be your students, but they do end up in our classes from time to time, and I think that is just very creative.
Yes, and I think that it's great that they love, all of my students for the most part, they love a thrift store. They love to go thrifting. They love to go hunting for vintage items. We went to the Nashville Flea Market with the student organization last semester, and of course that was a favorite trip. They absolutely loved that. And they are so good at spotting these items that other people may look at and say, oh, no, but I don't know what you would ever do with that. But, if the bottom part of the skirt is all torn and tattered, it could be cut off and turned into lacing for something else, and we could stitch that in to another garment. Maybe we're going to take it and turn it into a top, and we want it to lace up the front. We can save that fabric and reuse it. I have a lot of students doing some really fun things. One student runs a business where she upcycles quilts. So she rescues beautiful quilts that people have just donated to thrift stores and charity shops. And sometimes she has them from families that are donated, and she turns them into vests and jackets, and she'll even make shorts out of them, are very popular. She's made little flags and pendants and things like that. And so she's trying to save them because she said, I hate walking into Goodwill and seeing a quilt. Somebody took hours, probably weeks, months, years even, to make that item. And, there it is just sitting on the shelf for $10. I want somebody to understand how much work really went into that and to continue to love it.
Yeah.
And the fabric of those days is durable.
Yes.
Whether it's in a quilt or any item, but and the quilts, they seem to get better with age as they get used. So
yes, and we talk about that with textiles, that 1970 was really when we started to see polyester become the king fabric of the textile world, and it was marketed as this amazing thing. Get rid of anything in your closet that isn't polyester, because it's not going to stain, it's not going to hold odors, it's going to look perfect, you don't have to iron it. I mean, it's all, we really push, you got to have as much polyester as possible. I mean, polyester, its base component is petroleum byproduct, so it's not great the way that it's being produced. We are recycling a lot of it now, which really helps. But, before then, we were using cotton, wool, silk, linen. We were using these fabrics and these fibers that they just, if you have anything made of linen, it just gets better with age. It just, every single wash, it gets softer and softer and nicer and smoother. And we don't see those being used as much because they are a little more difficult to care for. And people really like convenience when it comes to that stuff.
They wrinkle a little more.
Exactly.
Than polyester.
Yes.
I really like the historical aspect of your research. I grew up in the 60s, and this title just jumped out at me. To the beach we go, the appeal of road trips in the 1960s.
Yes.
I mean, that's my childhood right there. You had 1 week in the summer, and that's where you headed.
Yes, and we were talking, so in the School of Human Ecology, we have a costume collection, and in it has a rotating exhibit that's called the McIndoe Historic Costume Collection.
Yeah.
And there was 1,500 items in their clothing items last time I checked. I know there's more now. There's probably closer to 1,800.
Wow.
We have accessories. It dates from the mid-1800s up through modern times. And most of my research is out of historic fashion. People forget about the history of fashion and forget where things come from. I always tell my students, well, the 90s is really popular right now. And I'm like, but the 90s came from the 70s and the 60s, which came from the 30s, which goes back into the 19th century. I mean, you have to trace the history to understand it all. And that article specifically was really, really fun to write because you got to learn about, that's where really easy care dresses came from, because when you were going on a trip, you didn't have time to get up every morning. And, I'm not going to go out and get fully dressed up head to toe. It's where we got into the leisure suits and the things that it was get up in the morning, get dressed, get back in the car, because we are making it all the way across this country and back in that 1 week, you said. So that was definitely a fun one to do some research on.
Yeah, the old three-piece suits.
Yeah.
Yep. I've had a principal or two or a professor or two wearing the full three-piece leisure polyester leisure
yes, the
suit.
polyester leisure suit. That was that
would be kind
staple.
of a fun exhibit. The way college professors have dressed
Oh,
through
that
the
would be.
through the decades.
Oh, that'd be a fun one. We do a lot of decades-based exhibits, but I think that one needs to go somewhere the Hall of Derryberry. We could make it just one right after the other.
We were talking earlier before the show about the old tweed jackets with elbow patches. That was a standard for a while there.
Oh, 100%. And again, back then, they were actual suede and leather elbow patches. So again, they just got better as every time you wore them. They just aged a little bit more, whereas now, most of the time, it's faux leather and it starts to crack after a few wears and things like that. Yeah.
Another thing that I liked about your research is how you tie it to the local community. Just looking at the titles here, History of Quilting in the Upper Cumberland, Tennessee Tech Basketball and Cheerleading Through the Years, What We Were Wearing, a Timeline of Cookville Fashions. I think that's another thing that, to me, having read your veto, that sets your research apart, is that it's not just history, but it's local history.
Yes, and that was very important to me. When they first showed me the costume collection, Dr. Anderson said most of it is from Cookville. I mean, it is from residents that have donated it. And as I started digging through a lot of the histories and the stories, and I mean, some of the garments have actual folders on the front of them that have stories and pictures, and here's when I wore this, and here's what you need to know about it. And as I started to go through it more and more, I thought, we need to put this out there. People need to see what we have and some of the amazing things and some of the quilts that we have that have been donated to us. And I worked with the Cookville History Museum on that exhibit, and it was a lot of fun because, of course, they had pictures to go along with it at times, or they would have stories even of, well, Miss Johnson used to wear something like this when she was going downtown, and she would have wore that to go to the bank because, you had a bank outfit that you needed to have your hat because that was a very proper occasion. And so it's been so much fun to find those things and connect them. And I work a lot with Megan Atkinson over in archives. We try to connect the dots as much as we can to create a full timeline, if possible, for some of the garments we have in the costume collection.
Talking about occasions, we were talking about it a while back. People used to dress a lot differently going to the airport.
Yes.
You know,
Really?
It was in the early days of air travel. They were dressed up very
100%.
well.
We have a lot of the donations that have come in lately have been full collections. Someone has given us their entire closet that they have. And one I went to pick up from a donor in Sparta, and she was telling me some stories, and she pulled out her outfit she wore to go on her honeymoon. And so I was showing it to the students. I was like, and this is her honeymoon dress. And they're like, what are you talking about? And I was like, well, when she got on the airplane, because this was a huge deal. I mean, she was going to fly somewhere to go on her honeymoon. And they're like, how could you wear that on a plane for just hours at a time?
Now it's
They're
about
like,
comfort.
yeah, you've got to be comfortable. And I said, well, because you may have taken one plane trip over a 25-year time period. It was an occasion. You got dressed up for it. It was not just, like we do today, like you said, throw on your sweatpants and a T-shirt and get there as close to the takeoff time as possible so you can just sleep on the plane. It was a whole experience that people went through, and it was very different. I love the stories that one of our donors, she was 93 years old, and she gave us her mother's items. So they had there was some very beautiful pieces in there. And she had her outfits from the 1940s, and she had a bank outfit. And she only wore it to the bank. She said, because when you went to the bank, you were talking money. It was serious business, and you needed to be professional, and you needed them to know that you understood what you were talking about, and you needed to make sure that you were presentable, and you had your hat on just perfectly. She said, and nowadays, I mean, we just drive through the bank. We don't even go in anymore. We just go to the drive-through where everything's direct deposited. She said, and my mom, that dress never left her closet unless she was going to the bank. That was all it was for. Yeah.
I was looking at photographs of like the World Series in the 40s. The men were all wearing suits.
Oh, yeah. Yes. It was a very popular. We have a coat from the draft, the NFL draft in the I want to say it was the 60s time period, or what the draft would have been at that time. And that's the way when I show it to students, they're like, they wore this? Like, they wore, like, a full-on suit to sit in for hours upon hours. Now it's a little bit more of a runway. They're really getting dressed up to go and hopefully get their name called to walk across that stage. But no, they had a very formal, you had to wear the tan coat, and you had green slacks that went with it. And it's amazing to think that was not that long ago.
And that it's a personal expression rather than a uniform.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And men wore hats. I remember my dad coming home from work, and he owned a lumber yard, but he always had his hat. And the first thing he did when he got home is he would open the closet door, and at the top he put his hat. I missed that. I wasn't there during the hat days.
Yes, it was.
We're going to bring back hat
We
days.
should. And hats are getting popular again. And I think one of the big things is, we saw hats start to be less popular in the 60s and the 70s for men and women. And I tell this because I think it's so funny. It was because that's when the hair care industry really started to get big. And people were spending so much money on their hair that it was like, well, I can't cover this up. I mean, I'm spending, $20 to go get my hair set in rollers and have these big curls for the week. I'm not about to put a hat on top of that and ruin it. So it's again, how fashion mirrors the history and the times, and it very much is dependent on society and culture at that moment.
Do you have a permanent display in the Human Ecology building?
So we have in the building, we have 4 commercial windows that are set up to teach our fashion students about how to do window displays. And when that class is not being taught, they are full of displays from the costume collection. So right now they have a display that is the seasons and what different outfits would look like in spring, summer, fall, and winter throughout history. But usually when the class is not happening, there's 4 windows there in Oakley Hall. As soon as you walk in, just go straight to the back of the building, and there's 4 windows, and they will almost always have a display of some sort from the costume collection.
And I saw where you had also curated some exhibits for the Appalachian Center for Craft.
Yes.
Is there a display there currently, or
There's
is it?
not a display
Okay.
there currently. We had the display there for about 3 months, I believe it was, and we partnered with local photographers, and we had pictures that they had taken that then we matched kind of an outfit to in a way. So some of them were direct interpretations. We saw something in the picture and the students curated an outfit based off of that. Others, they had a little bit more of that indirect, a little bit more artistic expression to them. But that one was fun because I really just let the students go with it. I mean, I gave them the pictures, we looked at it, they pulled things out, they dressed mannequins, they helped set it up. So it's a really good learning experience for them, and something great they could put on their resume as well. But it was so much fun, and I tell them all the time that we got to figure out a plan to do another one because
Yes.
it was a lot of fun for me and my students, and it was great again because a lot of people saw it that didn't know that we had a costume collection at Tech. And I got a lot of calls after that about things that wanted to be donated to us.
Yeah, you have a vast collection.
We do. It is.
Yeah.
It is very, very large. I think most people would not imagine when I open the door to this, they think it's a closet. I mean, the building itself or the room itself would imply that it was a closet. You open it up and it just keeps going. I said it's like a magical room that you just keep looking and there's just more stuff coming out of it from everywhere. So it's very full right now.
Well, I was also looking, not only are you active in research, but you are in service too. For example, you're on the faculty senate. I just cycled off the faculty senate.
Yeah.
What do you think is probably the biggest need for faculty here at Tech?
I think at times, this is my second year on Faculty Senate, and I know from speaking with some of my colleagues, I think there's times that faculty want to be heard, and it might not even be this massive issue. It's just one small thing that we're wanting some clarification on. I hear a lot that communication, we're out of the loop. You know, if you're not on the committee, you don't know what's happening. And so then when they come to you with this idea, you're sort of like, well, where'd that come from? I have no idea what you're talking about right now. And so I think if we had, like, we're getting some great communication about the general education and how that's being changed. And I think it's wonderful that we're hearing that because I think a lot of us would have felt very, very differently if it would have just happened. And we were just kind of like, well, what do you mean? We're changing these classes. And we are being brought in and they're having the town hall meetings, which I think is great to get ideas on what should the general education curriculum look like at Tech. So having that open communication and knowing that sometimes you can't give everybody all the details at once, but even just, you know, the mass email that you can say, hey, we sent it. Like, you know that this is happening. Here's the dates. Here's the times. Here's when you need to be there. It helps a lot when we get that communication so that we're all on the same page with a lot of these things. You're never felt like you're caught off guard with something.
Right.
We would definitely agree. Communication is our thing. It's,
Communication's
we
important.
say it a lot, but it's nice to hear it from other disciplines
Yes.
to say, yes, okay,
Oh,
it
yeah.
isn't just us.
No, not at all.
Do you have another question?
The only other question I had, she has told us about, and that's being promoted to associate professor. Congratulations.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yes.
That's happy. I'm very thankful for that. I had great guidance. I mean, I will tell people and I tell everyone I work in an amazing school with an amazing director, and I didn't have questions as we went through. And sometimes you hear
Good.
very scary things about tenure and promotion, and I felt from my side with our school and our director and my peers that I knew what was expected along the way. I knew what I was supposed to be doing, so that helped out a lot. So I give them to all the thanks for giving the guidance to me.
And you did
being
both,
there.
right?
I
Tenure?
did both. Yes, I
Wow.
did tenure and promotion at the same time.
Well, that's good. Congratulations.
Well, thank
on
you.
that
Thank you so
successful,
much.
Promotion and tenure. I do have a question for
Okay.
you. With your background in merchandising and design, if you could ban one fashion trend forever, what would it be?
Okay, I'm gonna go off of one that comes out of my time period growing up, and I think all of us can collectively agree. Anything that is low rise and sits on your hips, specifically low rise jeans, they have tried to make their way back into the fashion cycle. And I'm like, not only do they just not work on any body type really, but they're not comfortable. I mean, when you're constantly wondering, like, am I okay? Is everything covered the way it needs to be? That just cannot be a comfortable experience. Like, just a nice normal mid-rise or high-rise on pants has a purpose for being there. It's just, in terms of fashion, it doesn't add anything. And that's one of my big things I tell students is you want fashion to add something. I mean, to add some sort of value, be it expression, be it comfort, be it you're showing an element of your personality. It needs to add something to your life, not be there because, well, I'm following this trend, but I'm very uncomfortable while doing it. You want it to be something that you feel good about.
And that trend has sort of died down.
Yes.
And maybe it will stay
I hope
away.
so. As I tell the students, the worst part about fashion is not evolutionary, it's revolutionary. It doesn't matter what the trend is, as much as you're like, we will never do that again. It will somehow work its way back in. There will be the things, I said, there's always going to be that moment that you look at a picture of an outfit you wore and you're like, whew, glad we'll never do that again. And as soon as you say it, like a year later, you'll see it back out on the shelf somewhere and you're like, why? Why are we doing
Somebody
this? I
has
just
the
don't
idea.
understand.
Let's just do something different, and then that's what happens.
We call them hip huggers. I remember.
Yes, that's what they were. That is what they were. I mean, so I know eventually it's going to happen. We're going to see them. But
is there a time frame that you think that fashions cycle in and out?
Yes. So we know that in the last probably 20 years or so, fashion really comes back about every 8 to 10 years at most. I mean, we have seen this like really quick turnaround in fashion. Before then, you would have 30 or 40 year gaps in between, like clothing from the 90s, more of like the floral patterns and the plaids. Those came out of the 60s. So you had a good 30-year span in between there. However, we're seeing a lot more now of they're saying, the early 2000s trends are back. And as much as I'm pained to admit that was 20 years ago, it's happening a lot faster. We're starting to see, like I saw one the other day that said this 2014 trend you're not going to believe is coming back into your closet. And I was like, that's too soon. That's only 9 years ago. We can't call that. We cannot call that a trend cycling back just yet. But it is. Fashion's moving very quick because of social media. I mean, it really is social media. It is the fact that we have a lot more instant access. Before, I know you guys understand this. All fashion came from magazines for the most part. You had to wait on that Vogue September issue.
Yes.
If you were in fashion,
thick.
it was literally inches thick, and it was like your guidebook for the year. You had to wait on that to come out. Now, I mean, most journalists barely have time to hit publish on an article before somebody else has already shared it. Somebody else has already put it out there. They're trying to refine a story, and it's blown up on social media already. So fashion's moving so quick, and I think because of that, we want to get on to the next thing just faster than we ever have before.
Yeah, and I've heard researchers say it can be tied to the economy, like the skirt lengths and things. Is there anything to that?
Oh, there is. Yes,
Yeah.
there's a lot of history and research behind that, and that has happened for a long time. Fashion is very tied historically to politics, the economy, the societal ideals at the time. There is so much research on, purple becoming the color of royalty, and you couldn't dare wear purple. Part of the reason of that was, for a long time, the only way you could make purple dye was there was one clam in the Mediterranean Sea that if you scraped the outside of its shell, it would create purple dye. Just didn't have access to it. It was very difficult. Spain, black became the color of royalty because Spain was able to get that pigment and that dye from their colonies in Mexico. And so other nations didn't have that. And so it became something that was very much a status symbol. And while we might not see that with colors so much nowadays, we certainly do still see a lot of that being tied into the politics and the culture and society and those things that we talk about that are much bigger picture. I tell people fashion, everyone thinks is very much just that superficial external appearance. It goes so much deeper than that. The clothes you choose to wear, even if it is just, I got up this morning and I'm tired and I threw on a t-shirt and called it a day, that tells you something about, I got up this morning and I was tired, versus I got up and I want to go in and I'm going to do this presentation, so I'm going to wear a suit and I'm going to present myself in a way that I feel very confident in my abilities. There's so many different tiny little elements to it that people don't really even assess when they're thinking about the fashion choices they make.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for coming and
Oh,
talking
yes.
about your
It's been
work. It's very
fascinating.
interesting.
It
Well,
is.
thank you
I don't
for
know when you
having me.
sleep.
We could talk some more, yes. We didn't have to get to class. We could talk some
That's
more.
right. That's right. Well, thank you guys for having me. This has
Yeah.
been a lot of fun. I really
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
We've enjoyed it. Thank you.